Welcome to the OK Book Club, where we dive into books, stories, people, and tons of different topics. And today's episode is on the third of 3 books of the Norendy Tales. This book is is entitled Lost Evangeline by Kate DiCamillo. And what we'll do is we will talk about the book, we'll talk about the series, but before we begin, very, very important, just like we went on a journey with the Hotel Balzar, we will go on a journey with this book. So this particular episode you do not want to listen to. You want to stop here and pause it. You want to read the first 2 chapters. It's an introduction to this book. We'll talk a lot about the experience of having this book, starting the new book, but really only the first 2 chapters, reading up to page 14 before you listen. So, all these podcasts are evergreen, which basically means you can listen to it anytime, today, into the future, and God willing, I hope that this podcast is still out there and people are listening 30 years from now, right? But I do want to tell you, I picked up this book yesterday, which was October 1st, 2025. And I tell you what, I don't think this has ever happened in my life with a book. I wanted to get it the day that it was published, the day that it was released. So I went down to the local Barnes & Noble on the way home from school, and I wasn't able to pick it up on the day of release, which, like I said, was September 30th. Why? Because I had to pick up you-know-who, Jasper Doggy Daycare, and oh my goodness, God forbid I was late. So I walk in, and I figure, okay, it's a new book. It's got to be in a special place. So I just go to every location where it possibly could be, new releases, new books, and of course I couldn't find it. And I actually had thought about, maybe I should call up ahead and reserve the copy. This is a popular author. This is a popular trilogy. You know what? Maybe it's going to be sold out. Well, I didn't really think so. So bottom line is I wanted to see if I could find it. Of course I couldn't. And as it turns out, I ended up getting a store employee. Oh, yes, here it is. We have it. So first off, friends, what I wanted to do is to go over my first impressions. Right here, right now, I haven't opened up the book yet. I haven't read a single word, but I hope you've experienced this. Whether young or old, you get that new album. And yes, if you're old enough, just as old as I am, we used to get that new music. It was a new album. It was a new CD, right? It was a new 45. Yes, look that up, children, a new 45. But anything new that you collect that's important in your life, whether it's a new toy, like I said, maybe it's going to that new release for that great movie that you're looking forward to. Even I collect baseball cards, sports cards, that new annual release, the first day of baseball season. Certainly in the book world, a whole generation look forward to that release of the new Harry Potter book. And you know what? In my mind, for us, this trilogy of the Norendy Tales, we'll talk about that as well. That could be a whole different podcast, pronouncing words correctly. So do this, boys and girls, and adults alike. We went through a whole series of journey with the Hotel Balzar. So put down in front of you, hopefully you have the hard copies. The Hotel Balzar right next to Lost Evangeline, and even, of course, the Puppets of Spellhorse. But since we went on this long journey with the Hotel Balzar, we can kind of look at everything about it. You're picking it up in your hands. And the first thing you notice is the paper jacket cover and how The prince, it's cursive. The title, Lost Evangeline, is raised. Gold lettering. You have on the front this little girl. I haven't read anything. The only thing I know about this book, it's a modern fairy tale, and that apparently the main character here is a small girl. That's all I know. But clearly you can make out something here on the cover. You've got what looks to be like a cat flowing around her as if these are kind of dream sequences. You've got a seagull, it looks like. You got a ship, almost like a sailboat. And it almost looks like a ice skating boot. Looks like you got a whale. And this main character, this little girl, has got her arms stretched out wide. She's in a white dress. Her skirt is flowing, and her black hair is flowing in the wind. And she's standing on this little wooden spool of thread. And it's as if, like I said, it's almost like she's celebrating her life and what she's going through with all these images stenciled throughout and around in an arc around the title of the book. And it almost looks like she's, the spool of thread is like on a countertop. And it's funny, it's clearly, if you look at it, it looks like it's as if she's standing on an ocean, a wave of water, but looking closely, it's wood, right? You can see the imprints of a nice kind of wooden counter. And finally, I'd be remiss without saying the one detail that I neglected to bring up is there's a sewing needle through the thread on the spool and through the eye of the needle weaves all these images, like I mentioned. And again, it's as if this is the actual thread. So obviously something has to do with sewing here with our story. At the bottom of the cover, it's in small letters in print, a Norendy Tale. Underneath it, it's almost as if this is the Norendy Tale's logo. And it's throughout the cover, on the binding of the cover, the front cover, the back cover. It's a simple curved line as if it's an open book on a table. The illustrator is Sophie Blackow, and some of you may be familiar. Hey, listen, you're fans of Kate DiCamillo. She's the illustrator in The Beatrice Prophecy. So many of Kate DiCamillo's illustrators, they're so varied, and yet they're all similar in so many ways. We could do an entire episode on this, but if you're fans of Ivy and Bean, she's the illustrator in that series. She won 2 Caldecott medals, which is basically the Academy Award for picture books, annually given out. She won it twice. If I'm correct here, just looking this up, it's Finding Winnie, picture book, and also Hello Lighthouse. And from the description in the back of the book, she's illustrated 45 books for young readers. The book itself, as you know, if you have it in front of you, they're small. As if, again, they're perfect for young readers. They fit in your hand, even for adults. Books can be, especially picture books, big, can be bulky, but really, they're so simple to carry and read in your hands. And if you put them up on the shelf right next to each other, the spine of the book, the part you actually see, it's almost like the book bindings, but just formatted all the same. It's got this classical look with a black Norendy Tale up on top, then DiCamillo, the title of the book, and then all the way down with this nice logo, Candlewick Press, with this little flame at the bottom. And it's just has such a classical look. On the back, again, this is the paper cover for the hardcover edition. Again, you got the logo, the Norendy Tales, and here's what it's written for this book. Two-time Newbery medalist Kate DiCamillo reunites with two-time Caldecott medalist Sophie Blackwell in a captivating original fairy tale set in the world of the puppets of Spellhorse and the Hotel Balzar. And we have this big leather boots, and sitting right there on the boots is this little girl. So finally, before we get into our story, you open up the hardcover and you see in the inside cover a wonderful illustration of a little town down by the sea, cobblestone street, heading down to the ocean, the bay, the shoreline. And it's just, you can tell it's an older town with older buildings. And there's off in the distance, it's the sun rising, or maybe it's the sun setting, right? With the sailboat out and seagulls flying around. And then, just like the Hotel Balzar, and this is why you want to get the hardcover edition, my friends, the actual cover is different than the paper cover. This little girl is riding on the back of this cat. And it's interesting because clearly you get a sense that the main characters are not only this little person, this little girl, and maybe this cat, but if you compare it to the Hotel Balzar cover, you've got the Countess, right? Smack in the middle, boxed in with Blitzkopf. So this is why it's a series. This is why it's a trilogy. So much is similar. And as you open up the page, you have long ago in a land called Norendy. You've got a sailboat up against the shores of a big, huge rock jutting out into the sea, and comparing it to, again, the Hotel Balzar. Same first page. You've got the picture of the hotel detailed long ago in a land called Norendy. And it's funny. I spent a lot of time talking about connections and between the two books and hoping there were. But I think unless there's some kind of explanation in this last book about Norendy, I think the only connections, other than purposely putting in some fun, different illustrations like they did with the suitcase spelled out on the front, Spellhorse, I think the only connection is the fact that this was in this land that is entitled Norendy. Other than that, I guess the stories being fairy tales, yes, being long ago, yes, but no other connections. And then, as you turn the page, and check this out. This is different from, again, my version of the Hotel Balzar. Maybe this could be unique to Barnes & Noble, although I don't believe it is. Usually they'll say a special Barnes & Noble edition. But you open a page and it's a color photo, the only one in the book. And it's purposely attached to the inside page, like you can pull it out and keep it like it's a postcard. It's a beautiful drawing of this girl. It looks like she's got a sweater on top of this rock surrounded by daisies, and you got a bee. And again, woven as if it's these threads from the top of her head go off into the distance, into the horizon, like it's a dream. Like she's thinking, but what does these threads lead to is this big tall ship out on the edge of the horizon in the ocean. You compare this to the Hotel Balzar book, and basically the Hotel Balzar is, again, maybe there's other editions that could be color. That would be wonderful. I'll look for that. But it's a whole description, lots of details of the inside of the hotel, specifically the lobby of the hotel. And always, you'll see this, children with books, the author will dedicate a book to people. And the next page is, it's dedicated for Carla, who gave me the lamp, and for Sophie, who lit it. And the dedication, that's the dedication from Kate DiCamillo, and the illustrator, Sophie Blackow, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, she wrote, "For my father who made me into a traveler like him, and for Kate who wrote me a map." Interesting, right? Again, this is for my friends that are younger. You will always have this page again in the front of the book that details the publisher, when the book was released, the actual year, and the address. In this case, it's Candlewick Press out of Somerville, Massachusetts, and its website, candlewick.com. And here is Jasper. You may hear him in the background. Oh, there he is. There he is. So, again, compared to the Hotel Balzar, you'll get right into, it'll say chapter 1, right? But here in the Lost Evangeline, threaded with the title is Book the First. Again, as if maybe this is a part of the book, a section of the book, because the next page, when you turn to it, you'll see chapter 1. And friends, just so you know, we will have a retrospective episode on all three, at some point, all three books in this trilogy. And we will have certainly separate episodes on the Puppets, the Spell Horse, because what's clear is that you can read each of these independently on their own without having read all three. But it will be fun to see what we have in common. And what's interesting is always with great books, and this goes without saying, but I know this is going to be a good book. The first two books were really enjoyable, so I don't have to worry about whether or not this book is going to be good. It will be. Whether it's better or worse than the first two, that's up to each individual person. But you always want to look forward to, with a favorite author, with a great book, exactly what is the first paragraph. How is it that the author introduces a book? And I tell you, listen, maybe authors are different, but I got to believe most. If you're going to spend the most amount of time on any particular paragraph in any book, it's got to be that first paragraph, that first sentence, and the last paragraph or the last sentence, right? Grab the reader up front or end with the bang. And just to go back to the Hotel Balzar, this was the beginning of the Hotel Balzar. In March of that year, Marta and her mother arrived at the Hotel Balzar. They were given an attic room that contained a bed, a sink, and a battered chest of drawers. So no Once Upon a Time, just setting the scene, right? And again, there's a first, going along with the first page, which is always on the right, on the left is a corresponding picture. From the Hotel Balzar, you've got her mother getting dressed and Marta sleeping in her bed and waking up. Similar here in Lost Evangeline. The opening paragraph. There once was a boy who longed to go to sea. Tisk, said his father. Do not be one of those who spend their lives spinning pointless fantasies. I will not have it. So what do you have there? Yes, the modern fairy tale. It wasn't once upon a time, but there once, right? And it's all capital letters. In all capital letters from the Hotel Balzar, it was in March of that year. So what's interesting is you can see right away this metaphor of spinning, of thread, of string, of sewing. And yes, my young friends and adults, what's fun to analyze in books is just as literally you're spinning yarn into clothes, you're spinning and weaving a story into a book, paragraphs into a chapter. It's just a wonderful use of the language. And immediately, right, what do we have here? We've got, obviously, we're not talking about the protagonist here. Protagonist is the main character. But you've got some conflict which is almost beautifully done again. If you're going to grab the reader, you got a boy longing to go to sea, and you got a father who's pushing back. No, I'm not going to have it. And what's the picture that goes along here with this first page? It looks like a father in front of a fire, the mother, I'm guessing the wife, sitting right next to him, weaving something, sewing something. And you've got those threads, just like in the cover, onto the ground. And up above the mantle of the fireplace, and again, the mantle of this fireplace, similar to the Puppets of Spellhorse, you have a picture of a boat. And what was so similar to the original book, The Puppets of Spellhorse, was it was all about a sea captain. So clearly, right away, we've got some connections. So 7 pages in the first chapter, it's just so amazing to see and read an author at the top of her game. What we have learned here is we've got this husband and a wife, and clearly the wife is realistic, like resolute, practical, but like she's set in her ways. She doesn't dream, and it's the opposite of this husband, right? The husband is almost dreaming, longing, wanting for something, looking for adventure. And he talks about, wouldn't it be amazing to be out on the sea and see all the stars? And what does the wife say back to him? You can see the stars right above you, right where you are. Stop looking for something that, and stop dreaming, stop longing for something when you got everything that you have here, right? And what did we learn, like I said, from that first paragraph? Well, this boy grew up and ultimately was sitting in front of this fire that we saw the illustration from, and he's looking back on his early life, wanting to actually go out to the sea, wanting to be a sea captain, right? Similar to the Puppets of Spellhorse. But he ended up doing as his father did, because his father stifled and stopped his dreams early on, and he ended up becoming a shoemaker just like his father, right? And then what do we find one day? That this shoemaker finds a little person, a human being, in the palm of his hand. He was sitting right there in his shoe, and he wants it. The wife says no. And we end up learning that he names this little child, this little creation. He believes it to be real. The wife says, no, this is magic. This is not right. Dismiss it, get rid of it. It belongs to somebody else. He wants it, right? And he ends up naming her Evangeline because he remembers this sloop when he was a boy. And on the side of this sloop was written the boat's name, Evangeline. And that is how the first chapter ends, my friends. And like I said, you just want to keep reading. And again, I'll stop here because this is so important in terms of learning. Talk about understanding, being able to understand what you read. It's not just being able to pronounce words. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent about this. But as I read that word, I hope you experienced the same thing. On the side of this sloop. I read this and I'm like, what is a sloop? Right? Well, guess what? The most famous example of being able to comprehend any text is a research report that was done from American adults, American kids that knew all about American sports. But it was a particular text and story about explaining the sport cricket. And talk about something, if you have no background knowledge, you have no understanding of all the different words in a sport, well, you're not going to understand it. You're not going to understand that paragraph, that text, that whole story. Again, everything is dependent in so much of our comprehension in reading, and it's overlooked and it's not talked about enough. Your vocabulary, your background knowledge needs to be just as important as being able to pronounce words, decode words. So a sloop, it's a certain type of sailboat. And again, like myself, growing up in the suburbs, I've never had any experience with being on boats. Certainly understanding the different types of boats. And in this case, just a sailboat. Any sailboat can be different. Well, this type of sailboat, a sloop, has a tall pole, really big sails. A tall pole is a mast, another word that was referenced in the first chapter that I had no idea really what it meant. So again, it just goes back to the importance of background knowledge and knowing as much information as you can. Always don't lose the opportunity, my young friends, boys and girls, of learning every day, even if it's something, especially if it's something that you have no reference point to. Take that as an opportunity to learn and go into different directions, right? So I'll tell you what, it's almost like right now I wish I had known more about boats and ships, and certainly going out in boats and ships. So as we wrap up that first chapter, we're definitely looking forward to how this story is going to develop. So in chapter 2, basically, we learn that the shoemaker, of course, because he's talented in making things, he fashions furniture, a bed, a dresser, night tables, and of course, shoes for her. And what's interesting is you get the sense here, right, that it's a little tiny person. So she grew from a baby to a toddler to a young girl. So she's a young girl now. But what's a great line here in the second chapter, she changed her shape without ever changing her size. So she's a little girl, and she's first says out loud, when are we going to go to the sea, Papa? And he brings her down to the harbor, looking over the ships docked there and the men working, putting the crates onto the ships, full with fish, taking them off the ships. And one of the best lines here, as they look over the harbor from up on top of this nice hill, he takes her out of his pocket. And again, talk about connections with the puppet of Spellhorse. It's just so brilliantly done. He puts her in his pocket just like the maid had put the puppets in her pocket in that first book of the trilogy. And nevertheless, he takes her out of his pocket, puts her in the palm of his hand, and looks out to the sea, and she's yearning and she's wondering, just like her father, Papa, when shall we go? And when they look down, you talk about this great line in the use of a word. Again, so wonderfully done. They look down at the cats, right? And then clearly we know there's going to be a cat involved here, but look down at the cats who twine their way among the nets filled with silver-scaled fishes. Twine their way. What a brilliant use of the word. Twine, as you know, is strings, yarn, children, that's kind of wrapped together. And the word twine can be used as a verb, as kind of like a serpentine path, like twisting and moving through. You can kind of picture how a cat would be moving through items, almost like covertly and carefully. Just such a wonderful, wonderful sentence. So This has been a longer podcast, just as an introduction to the book, everything about the joy of picking up a new book, this third in the trilogy of the Norendy Tales, Lost Evangeline. Let me know your thoughts, KEVMOK21@gmail.com. This has been the OK Book Club. My friends, we will get back to this book as we take this journey together. Thanks for being with me, and keep learning.